The Dragon of South Beach, the deafening bass hammered against the walls of the VIP suite, a physical force in the air thick with smoke and the cloying scent of expensive liquor. Leo Kingston had an arm slung around the slim waist of a girl with cascading curls, a glass of amber liquid sloshing in his other hand. He was tapping his foot to the beat, head bobbing, a carefree grin plastered on his face. Laughter, high and flirtatious, bubbled around him, a symphony of giggles and designer perfumes. "Leo, baby, come on, let's do a shot," the brunette whispered, her breath hot against his ear. "Yeah, Leo, don't leave us out." Another girl with a sharp bob cut chimed in, shouldering her way closer with a full glass. "Ha, easy, easy. There's plenty of me to go around, ladies." Leo boomed, pulling them both in. The rim of his glass had barely touched his lips when, boom, the sound was like a shotgun blast. The heavy, solid wood door to the suite imploded inward, leaving a horrifying, splintered hole in its center. Shrapnel-like wood chips flew through the air like confetti from hell. A single, impossibly long and toned leg, clad in an ice-blue stiletto, retracted smoothly from the hole it had just created. It moved with a lethal grace that promised violence. The pulsing music, the laughter, the entire chaotic symphony of the room, it all died, as if strangled by an invisible hand. Dead silence. Absolute, pin-drop silence. The club's high-end sound system let out a few pathetic, low-frequency hums before it, too, went completely dead, as if the sheer force of the kick had short-circuited it. The lighting tech, probably paralyzed with shock, kept a single spotlight trained on the figure now framed in the ruined doorway. The light was blinding, haloing the woman who stood there. She wore a bespoke evening gown the color of a frozen lake, its minimalist cut as sharp as a razor's edge. Right now, though, it looked less like couture and more like battle armor dragged through hell and back. Willow Vance. The Willow Vance that Leo knew, and a Willow Vance he had never seen before. The cool, untouchable distance she usually wore like a shield was gone, replaced by a fury so intense it seemed to burn the air around her. Her long black hair had escaped its elegant pin, strands of it clinging to her sweat-slicked forehead and cheeks. And her eyes, those eyes that could make titans of industry tremble, were locked on Leo. They were churning with a blood-red inferno, a molten rage that looked ready to chew him up, spit him out, and then burn down the entire building for good measure. Her glacial gaze swept over every other frozen figure in the room. Her voice was a horrifying rasp, like sandpaper on rusted steel. Every word was laced with ice, yet barely contained the roar of a caged beast. Ow! The final word hit with the force of a physical blow, a sonic boom of pure authority honed by years of absolute command. It shattered the suffocating silence and sent a jolt of primal fear through everyone present. The suite felt like it had been instantly vacuumed of air. Go, get out of here now. Ethan Cole, Leo's best friend, was the first to snap out of it. He practically shoved the terrified girls toward the service exit. "Ethan, what's wrong with Mrs. Vance?" One of them stammered, her voice shaking violently. "Shut up, you saw nothing." Ethan hissed, breathing heavily. Leo was still in the same position, propped on an elbow, his arms still curved around the empty space where a girl had been seconds before. Whiskey had sloshed onto his designer shirt, staining the silk a dark gold. His handsome, roguish face was a perfect blank, his mouth hanging slightly open as he stared at the avenging angel in the doorway. This wasn't in the script, he thought. This makes no sense. This was his wife, Willow Vance, the one who kept him at a polite distance, the one who had her own life while he had his, the one who was so perpetually buried in work at her corporate headquarters you could barely catch a glimpse of her from one year to the next. Ethan, ever the loyal wingman, slid between Leo and Willow, forcing a stiff, terrified smile onto his face. Hey, Willow. What brings you here? We were just celebrating Leo's birth." "Oh, crap. I mean, Leo was. He was just." Ethan's forehead was beaded with sweat, his usual quick wit failing him completely. He jabbed Leo hard in the ribs with his elbow. "Leo, say something, you idiot." The jab shocked Leo back to some semblance of reality. He blinked, trying to find a flicker of her usual icy disdain in those crimson eyes, trying to convince himself this was just a booze-fueled hallucination. It wasn't a hallucination. There were only two raging fires burning in their depths, locked onto him with a heat that felt predatory, possessive. Her chest heaved with ragged breaths, the ice-blue fabric of her dress trembling with the tension in her body. Watching her reddening eyes and labored breathing, Ethan felt a cold dread wash over him. "Willow, are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Maybe you should sit down, have some water. I could get you some." Cold. Leo finally found his voice. He let out a long, drawn-out sound, his eyes lazily drifting over Willow's aggressively beautiful, frost-covered face. He deliberately let a smirk spread across his lips, his words slurred with practiced nonchalance. Well, if it isn't the CEO herself, taking a break from managing your pet project, that pretty boy assistant of yours, to come slumming it with us. To what do we owe the honor? An audit." He gestured with his glass. "I just opened a fantastic bottle of scotch. Care for a glass, Ms. Vance?" The rumors about her and her assistant, Mr. Matthews, had been the talk of the town for months. Leo spat the word audit like a dart, his tone dripping with provocation. He expected her to shoot him a look that could freeze fire, deliver a cutting retort, and then turn on her heel and leave, just like in all their other brief, unpleasant encounters. But Willow didn't move. The storm in her eyes was building, a terrifying pressure that, under the strobing club lights, made her look like something beautiful and deadly, on the verge of shattering. And then, before the echo of his taunt had even faded, as the careless smirk was still fixed on his face, the figure in the doorway, who had seemed carved from Arctic ice, roughly shoved Ethan aside and then, without warning, stumbled forward. She collapsed like an icicle snapping in a gale-force wind, the immense power holding her upright vanishing in an instant. "Hey, watch out!" The words flew out of Leo's mouth, pure instinct overriding his cynical bravado. Before he even knew what he was doing, he had opened his arms. Willow's legs gave out completely. She fell forward like a porcelain doll dropped from a great height, a fall that was both utterly reckless and terrifyingly fragile. She landed squarely in his unprepared embrace. A wave of shocking heat and a faint, cold floral scent slammed into him. Oof! The impact sent a pained grunt out of him as his back hit the plush cushions of the booth. He froze, a warm, soft armful of woman pressed against him. Her body was plastered to his. Through the cool, smooth fabric of her dress, her skin was burning with an unnatural, feverish heat that seeped through his own shirt, like holding a piece of white-hot iron. The rich smell of alcohol on his clothes mingled with her signature, understated scent, a cool, elegant fragrance that now seemed warped by the radiating heat. Her breathing was a mess, hot, ragged, and shallow. Each gasp felt like she was on the verge of suffocating. It ghosted against the side of his neck, raising a fine tremor on his skin. Leo's throat felt tight. He instinctively tried to push her away, his mind racing. Did my words make her sick? Is she drunk? No, Willow's discipline is legendary. She can drink anyone under the table. But this temperature, before his brain could form a coherent theory, her hot, soft lips moved, and a frantic gasp of air shot directly into his ear. Her voice was nothing like her usual composed tone. It was a shattered, desperate whisper, holding on to the last shred of consciousness. Each syllable burned its way into his ear canal, setting off a bomb deep inside him. Leo, the broken whisper, laced with a vulnerability he'd never heard before, was utterly foreign. Help! Me! Leo? In 3 years of marriage, she had never, not once, called him anything but his full name, Leo Kingston, in that cool, formal tone of hers. This single, intimate word was like a branding iron searing a part of his soul he never knew existed. He was completely stunned. An absurd and terrifying premonition shot up his spine. The next second, her lips pressed closer, soft and wet, brushing against his earlobe as she breathed the words that would incinerate what was left of his composure and his entire playboy persona. Someone drug me. Her breath was a scorching wave against his skin. Each word trembled. Take me home. I only want you. Her pale cheeks were flushed with an unnatural, violent crimson, as if she were burning from the inside out. Leo's throat went dry. Willow, Her lips pressed into a thin, white line, and a muscle in her jaw twitched, as if she were fighting an immense wave of pain. The hand clutching his shirt tightened, her knuckles white, her nails digging into his skin through the fabric. She stared at him, a low, wounded sound, like the whimper of an animal, escaping her throat. "Wait!" Willow, calm down. "What?" "Shut up." Her voice was laced with a desperate, feral frustration. Instead of letting go, her other hand shot out, slamming against the back of the booth next to his head, trapping him. Her body pressed even closer. The smooth fabric of her dress slid against his arm, sending a bizarre shiver through him. Her eyes were wild, unfocused, but locked stubbornly on his mouth and neck, like a dying traveler in the desert who had just found the last oasis. But there was no affection in that gaze, only a raw, primal urgency, a desperate need to tear apart anything that stood in her way. She looked like a starving wolf. "Antidote," she hissed again, the word muffled and raw, the sound a wounded beast makes when it's trapped and thrashing against the bars of its cage. The last thread of her self-control was snapping. She shook her head impatiently, her loose hair whipping across his face. The next second, she lunged. Her target, his neck. There was no finesse, no seduction. It was a bite, like a predator dropped on an alien planet, starved and desperate, attacking the only living thing in sight, driven by the crudest of instincts. Leo sucked in a sharp, ragged breath. It wasn't pain. It was the shocking electric jolt that shot from the point of contact straight to the top of his skull, a paralyzing current of pure heat. "Hiss! Willow, snap out of it!" Leo's voice was strained, a mix of shock and anger. Pinned against the cushions, he tried to tilt his head away from her relentless assault. He braced his hands on her shoulders, trying to pry this goddess-turned-rabid animal off of him. "Stop that. We need a doctor. I'll take you to the hospital. I'm not your goddamn anti." His words died in his throat. The skin beneath his palms, under the thin silk of her dress, was scalding hot, like holding onto a piece of metal pulled straight from a forge. This was no ordinary drug. At the same time, a single, glistening drop of saliva, mixed with something else, something with a strangely cold and sweet scent, escaped the corner of her mouth and landed on his expensive shirt. It wasn't alcohol. Absolutely not. Standing nearby, Ethan wiped a hand over his face, a stampede of obscenities thundering through his mind. "I got all wrong. This isn't the wronged wife catching her cheating husband. This is the wife having a full-blown medical emergency and trying to use her husband as a human antidote. This is a goddamn biohazard situation." This was intense. This was insane. This was not for public viewing, especially the look in Willow's eyes. She was looking at Leo like he was a perfectly cooked, medium-rare steak. The room was filled with the sound of her heavy, ragged breathing and the soft, desperate noises of her frantic, clumsy biting. "NGH." She shifted, as if the angle of his Adam's apple was unsatisfactory, and bit down again. Leo's scalp prickled with alarm. This couldn't go on. "Willow!" he roared, his hands clamping down on her arms. Using his superior strength, he finally managed to pry her off his neck, creating a few precious inches of space between them. The position was an absolute mess. Willow was practically straddling his lap, the ice-blue dress pulled around them. Leo was pinned beneath her like prey, his arms locked straight as he held her at bay, desperately maintaining a dangerous and ridiculously intimate stalemate. He finally got a clear look at her face. Her long eyelashes trembled, dotted with tiny beads of sweat. The terrifying red in her eyes had completely consumed the whites. Her cheeks were flushed a feverish pink, but it looked less like passion and more like a consuming fire. Her lips, slightly swollen and bruised from her own desperate biting, were parted, her breaths coming in short, agonizing pants. "Give it to me." She forced the broken words from her throat, her eyes wild with a desperation that was terrifying to behold. Her body instinctively tried to lunge at him again, her strength fueled by a madness that wanted to burn everything down. It was as if he, Leo Kingston, was the only thing in the universe that could offer her a moment's relief from the inferno consuming her. Leo's heart felt like it was seized by an icy hand. This wasn't just someone getting drugged. He suddenly remembered hearing whispers at some black market auction years ago, rumors of a rare Southeast Asian poison, something called scorched soul, odorless, colorless, activated by alcohol. It was said to make the victim's blood feel like it was boiling in their veins. If the fire wasn't quenched in time, their internal organs would literally cook from the inside out. A profound, chilling horror shot up his spine. He stared into her crazed, crimson eyes, her humanity almost completely burned away by the drug, and a feeling he had never experienced before, a combination of profound shock and explosive rage, detonated in his chest. It wasn't because she was using him as an antidote. It was because she had endured this inhuman torture, held on to her last shred of sanity, kicked down a goddamn door, and fought her way through hell, just to find him. Out of everyone in the world, she had chosen him. The arms that had been holding her at bay suddenly lost their strength. Leo let out a low, guttural curse, his voice raw. In an instant, his expression transformed. The usual carefree, playboy mask shattered into a million pieces. A dark, complex, and deeply suppressed emotion churned in his eyes, overwhelming the primal fire the situation had ignited in his own body. "Damn it all," he growled, the words trembling with an emotion he didn't even recognize. He yanked his arms back. No longer pushing her away, he wrapped his arms around her trembling, feverish body, pulling her into a crushing embrace, as if trying to absorb the fire that was consuming her. Like holding onto the last piece of driftwood in a hurricane. With a sudden, powerful twist of his body, he moved. In a single, fluid motion completely at odds with his usual lazy demeanor, he reversed their positions. 2. Getting down to business, Ethan's eyes were wide as dinner plates. He finally regained his senses and pointed frantically at the door. "Leo, man, not here. You two have got to go somewhere else." Leo's muscles coiled. Without a moment's hesitation, he hooked one strong arm under Willow's knees and clamped the other around her waist, lifting her as if she were a priceless, fragile treasure. She felt impossibly soft and terrifyingly hot, and his fingers instinctively curled at the searing heat. Willow let out a faint, weak whimper, her burning forehead finding the pulse point on his neck. Her hot breath on his skin sent a suffocating shiver through him. He stood, hoisting her full weight into his arms. He didn't waste a second. "Move!" he bellowed, his voice a low, commanding rumble that made everyone's heart jump. The terrified onlookers, still clogging the doorway, scrambled out of the way, creating a narrow path. Like an enraged beast, Leo charged through the chaos, clutching the contradictory bundle of fire and ice in his arms, shouldering past anyone too slow to get out of his way. Ethan was right beside him, his face grim. He was already on his phone, his thumb flying across the screen. "I cleared the back exit. Your keys. I'll pull the car around," he said, snatching the keys Leo tossed him. Into the West Service corridor. Before the words were out, Ethan was gone, sprinting toward the fire escape. Leo ran, feeling like he was wading through molasses and walking on hot coals at the same time. The motion seemed to make Willow even more uncomfortable. She squirmed in his arms, letting out muffled whimpers, her small, cold hands clawing uselessly at his chest. He glanced down at her. Her normally glacial eyes were now shrouded in a red, watery mist. Her gaze was unfocused, broken, and filled with an unspoken pain and a look that was shockingly close to pleading. It was a completely different Willow, armed with a fatal, devastating vulnerability. Leo's breath hitched, and his chest ached. He gritted his teeth, tucking her face into the crook of his neck. "Hang on," he rasped. "Almost there." He didn't slow down, racing through the club's labyrinthine hallways. The air was thick with the stench of cheap perfume and stale desperation. He held Willow tighter, wishing he had wings. Her breathing grew hotter, more erratic against his neck, each unconscious movement like a lit match on a short fuse. Her soft curves were pressed against him, the alarming heat and uncontrolled tremors from her body a constant assault on his own strained composure. Finally, he reached the end of the corridor. A heavy steel door was propped open, and a blast of cold, pre-dawn air hit him. He saw it, his black Porsche 911, waiting like a phantom in the shadows. Ethan was holding the passenger door open. "Hurry!" Leo practically threw her into the car. She landed in the seat with a pained groan, curling into a ball. He didn't even look at Ethan as he sprinted around to the driver's side and dove in. He slammed the ignition button without even thinking about his seatbelt. The engine roared to life. The car shot out of the narrow alleyway and into the sparse, late-night city traffic. The tires screamed against the pavement as the neon-drenched facade of the nightclub vanished in the rearview mirror. The speedometer climbed. Streetlights blurred into streaks of white and orange. The city became a shattered mosaic of light and shadow rushing past the windows. Inside the car, the air was thick with a suffocating heat. Willow's breathing grew heavier, each inhale a shuddering sob, each exhale a hot gust against Leo's tense arm. Her body convulsed, and she let out a low, animalistic sound, her hand shooting out to grab his right arm, her nails digging deep into his flesh through his shirt. Leo grunted in pain, but kept the wheel steady. "It's so hot." A broken syllable escaped her lips. The confined space of the car had become a torture chamber. She was desperate to escape something, yet desperate to cling to the only solid thing near her. The air in the car grew thick and cloying, saturated with her scent, which was now a strange mix of cool florals and a feverish, sweet musk. Leo's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel. Every muscle in his body was a tightly wound spring. He floored it, the roar of the engine drowning out the frantic thumping of his own heart. He risked a glance at her. Her long eyelashes were wet, her beautiful face twisted in a mask of tortured ecstasy. A fine sheen of sweat covered her skin. Each of her pained whimpers was like a needle pricking his nerves. Her unfocused, shimmering eyes would occasionally catch his in the rearview mirror. The same eyes that were usually colder than a winter storm were now just pools of shattered glass, reflecting a burning agony. He pushed the accelerator down harder. Finally, the gates of his family's private, high-security estate on the outskirts of the city came into view, wrapped in the deep darkness just before dawn. The tires shrieked as the Porsche skidded to a halt in front of the massive, ornate metal gates. Leo leaped out of the car, the cold air a welcome shock to his system. He rushed to the passenger side, unbuckled Willow, and lifted her into his arms again. She was even hotter now, her skin slick with a cold sweat. As the cool air hit her, she whimpered and instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face against his skin, a freezing animal seeking warmth. Her ragged breaths were now directly on the sensitive skin of his neck. Leo's atoms apple-bobbed. He ran, his dress shoes clattering on the marble steps. He fumbled with the key, threw the heavy door open, and charged through the cavernous, silent foyer without breaking stride. He took the stairs two at a time, kicked open the door to the master bedroom, and carried her inside. The man's heavy body descended with an undeniable force. "Look at me," Leo commanded, his hand tilting her chin up, forcing her gaze to meet his. No more words. No comforting whispers. He gave her the only answer that mattered. He crashed his mouth down on hers. It wasn't the clumsy, desperate biting from before. This was a precise, targeted capture of her hot, trembling lips. A kiss to seal the inferno raging inside her, and to silence the animalistic whimper of pain that was about to escape her throat. MMPH. Willow's entire body went rigid, then arched up before he pressed her more firmly into the mattress. Her eyelashes fluttered wildly, the red in her eyes exploding into a new universe of confusion and shock. This was too foreign, too overpowering, too destructive. It was lightning striking dry tinder, ice and fire, colliding in a cataclysmic explosion. First, there were muffled thuds, the sounds of a frantic struggle, followed by the sharp rip of fabric. Then, the heavy groan of the bed frame scraping against the hardwood floor, and a choked, indistinct cry from a woman. It was impossible to tell if it was pain or something else entirely. One very long, R-rated chapter later. Headache. Every bone in his body felt like it had been disassembled and then hastily put back together by a blindfolded amateur. Everything ached, especially his lower back. HNNGH. With a pain groan, Leo forced his leaden eyelids open. The first thing he saw was the ridiculously opulent crystal chandelier on the ceiling. The next thing he smelled was the aftermath. A potent cocktail of unfamiliar perfume, sweat, and something else entirely. He tried to turn his neck, and a sharp, fiery pain shot through it. Not just his neck, his lower back felt like it had been trampled by a herd of buffalo all night. Every muscle screamed in protest. He, Leo Kingston, the man they called the Dragon of South Beach, the king of Miami's nightlife, felt like a beached whale left to dry out under the morning sun. He slowly, carefully swiveled his eyes to the other side of the bed. Yep, empty, of course. So this is what they mean by love him and leave him, he thought bitterly. Just as the thought crossed his mind, he heard the soft patter of footsteps, accompanied by the fresh, clean scent of expensive body wash. Leo squeezed his eyes shut, feigning sleep. You can't see me. You can't see me. A cool, surprisingly soft hand landed gently on his cheek. Every muscle in Leo's body went rigid. A jolt of electricity shot from his face to his toes. He snapped his eyes open and found himself looking up at Willow's face, far too close for comfort. She was wrapped in a plush white bathrobe, her dark hair damp and tumbling over her shoulders. Her face was bare, her skin glowing, and her eyes were clear, bright, and filled with. What was that? A bizarre, mission-accomplished sparkle, as if the ravenous she-wolf from last night had been a completely different person. In stark contrast, Leo felt like a hapless scholar from an old folktale who'd had his life force drained by a demon queen. Willow leaned over him, her expression unreadable. There was no shyness, no embarrassment. Instead, she looked like she was about to deliver a keynote address at a business conference. Her lips parted, and she spoke in a clear, measured tone that made Leo's brain short-circuit. You're awake. Good. She paused, studying the dark circles under his eyes and his generally wrecked state with the critical eye of a quality assurance inspector. She nodded, satisfied. Don't worry, darling, she said, patting his cheek with a detached air of someone announcing a strategic merger. I'll take full responsibility. Leo felt his entire worldview shatter and rain down from the ceiling like cheap confetti. He had to have misheard her. Responsibility? Who's taking responsibility for whom? He stared at her, dumbfounded, his mouth hanging open, his eyes wide. The only sound he could make was a strangled, huh? Willow ignored his shock. She straightened up and strode to the window, pulling back the heavy blackout curtains with a decisive tug. Blinding sunlight flooded the room, illuminating the chaotic mess and a distinct, dark red stain on the pristine white sheets. Leo's eyes were involuntarily drawn to it. Fragments of the previous night slammed back into his memory. Willow's clumsy, untutored movements. Her initial cry of pain followed by broken whimpers. Her inexperience, a thought so cataclysmic it threatened to fry his already overloaded brain, detonated in his mind. Wait. What about her pet project assistant? What about the boy toys she supposedly kept on a leash? I thought we had an arrangement. We each had our own lives, This red stain? The sheer volume of new information was too much for his battered body to handle. He stared at the stain, his expression shifting from dumb shock to utter, petrified disbelief. You, he managed to croak, his throat dry. He shakily pointed a finger at the sheet, his hand trembling. This is... Willow followed his gaze and seemed to understand. The first tiny crack appeared in her composed, corporate mask. A faint blush crept up from her neck. But she took a deep breath and immediately regained her footing. She turned to face him, crossing her arms, forcing the icy persona back into place. Her voice, however, held the flat, professional tone of someone signing off on a project deliverable. Ahem. Correct. She cleared her throat. As you can see, last night was a necessary detoxification. My actions were, admittedly, rather urgent, and caused you a significant, She glanced at the dark circles under his eyes and the brutal-looking marks on his neck, choosing her words carefully. A significant increase in your physical workload. Leo was speechless. Willow continued her responsible debriefing. Therefore, based on the principles of our contractual relationship, and to compensate for the material depreciation incurred on my behalf during this unforeseen collaborative event, she paused, frowning slightly as if the term didn't quite fit. I have arranged the following. Like a magician, she produced a sleek, matte black card from the pocket of her bathrobe. an unlimited Amex Centurion card. Leo's eye twitched violently. The credit limit on this should be sufficient for your RNR, she stated, as well as a supplemental bonus for nutritional expenses, and she paused again, her eyes flicking to the stain, the heat on her cheeks deepening slightly, but her tone remained perfectly level. And for emotional damages. Thwack! The black card landed squarely on Leo's bare chest. It felt cool against his skin. He looked down at the card, then up at his wife's invoice paid, project closed expression, and then back at the damning red stain on the sheets. His brain's CPU completely melted down. The information overload caused a system failure, leaving him with nothing but giant, flashing question marks. Who am I? Where am I? What the hell just happened? The after effects of his night with Willow finally hit him all at once. The massive psychological shock combined with his body's extreme exhaustion was a tidal wave that dragged him under. Under Willow's slightly too concerned gaze, poor Leo Kingston's head lolled to the side, and his eyes rolled back. With a soft thump, he promptly fainted. Willow stared at his limp form, her brow finally furrowing as a flicker of panic broke through her composure. Hey, Leo? Now, get the medical team. No, wait, is he still breathing? Hey. The I'll take responsibility for you facade was starting to crack. Leo was floating in a warm, dark void. He could faintly hear Willow's voice, the cool, commanding tone now laced with a crackle of urgency. Lao, Leo, wake up. The sound was muffled like it was coming from underwater. Yeah, right, he thought groggily, like you're actually worried. And then, something gentle but firm pried his mouth open. A moment later, a cool, slightly sweet liquid with a strong herbal taste was being carefully poured down his throat. The technique was clumsy, and he almost choked. Cough, cough, cough. The violent coughing fit yanked him from his stupor. Tears streamed from his eyes as he gasped for air, his lungs burning. He blinked, his vision clearing. Willow's face was hovering over him, a hint of genuine tension beneath her carefully neutral expression. She was holding an elegant crystal glass containing a dubious-looking brownish liquid. What did you give me? Leo accused, his voice hoarse. Between his wrecked neck and his current state, he looked like a victim who'd been assaulted and then force-fed poison. Seeing him awake, Willow seemed to relax, but her corporate mask snapped back into place. A 10-year-old ginseng and ancient tortoise-shell restorative broth, she said matter-of-factly, with a straggleless root. For energy and vitality. Leo tried to sit up, but a jolt of pain from his back and neck sent him flopping back onto the pillows with a pained groan. My back! My neck! Willow, you're a goddamn succubus. His raw accusation seemed to catch her off guard, and a faint blush crept up her neck. She looked away, clearing her throat, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. As I said, I'm taking full responsibility. She picked up a sheet of paper from the nightstand. The header, in bold font, read, Leo Kingston Post-Incident Physical and Morale Recovery Initiative, V1. 0. Leo stared. A proposal, V1. 0. Are there going to be future updates? Willow ignored his stunned expression and began reading aloud, her voice as crisp as a morning stock market report. 1. A nationally recognized physical therapist will be retained for 3 weekly sessions, focusing on key areas of trauma. Lumbar, cervical, and, other affected muscle groups. Affected muscle groups? Leo thought hysterically. You might as well just list my social security number. 2. A team of private chefs will be on rotation to provide a custom, nutrient-rich, restorative diet. 3. A dedicated personal trainer will design a phased physical rehabilitation program. 4. Morale and wellness services. Options include, but are not limited to, therapeutic spa treatments, deep-sea fishing excursions, or access to your preferred clubs. She hesitated on the last word, a flash of annoyance crossing her face. 5. As the primary stakeholder, she continued, you are authorized to utilize the provided Centurion card for any and all retail or recreational activities deemed beneficial to your mental and emotional recovery. All expenses will be automatically approved. She finished reading and placed the document, which looked more like a corporate takeover strategy than a get-well plan, on his bedside table. Leo's jaw worked silently. He felt an almost hysterical urge to laugh. This woman is completely insane. He looked from the ridiculous proposal to his own battered body, the angry red marks on his neck a testament to her enthusiasm. His masculine pride had never felt so thoroughly trampled. "I don't need it," he snapped, trying to sit up again to protest. He only made it halfway before crying out in pain and collapsing back onto the pillows. A soft chuckle escaped Willow's lips. It was like watching an iceberg crack open to reveal a sunlit spring. The sudden warmth in her expression was so dazzling it made Leo's head spin. She quickly composed herself, but the smile still lingered in her eyes. She leaned over and, with an incredibly gentle touch, poked the edge of the deepest bite mark on his neck. "Does it still hurt?" Her voice was soft, almost like she was cooing at a child. The cool touch of her finger sent a strange shiver down his spine. Before he could grumble a response, she added, in a tone of clinical observation, "I'll be sure to adjust the pressure and angle next time." After all, she tilted her head, studying him like a fascinating puzzle. Poor user feedback is detrimental to a long-term strategic partnership. Leo nearly choked. His face flushed crimson. User feedback. Strategic partnership. Willow, you're not human. Seeing that her patient was on the verge of fainting again, a sly glint appeared in Willow's eyes. She straightened up and walked to the window, her back to him. "You'll stay in bed and recover for the next few days," she announced in that same breezy, authoritative tone. "I'll call your office and arrange for sick leave." "Sick leave?" Leo yelped. "What's the reason?" "You can't exactly tell them I can't get out of bed because my wife tried to eat my neck." His reputation as the Dragon of South Beach would be ruined. Willow turned, crossing her arms, the formidable so back in full force. The official story is that Mr. Kingston is on an intensive, hands-on research trip to Southeast Asia to evaluate high-end wellness services for potential new venture. He is suffering from extreme exhaustion due to his dedication to the company and requires several days of uninterrupted rest. Leo was speechless. High-end wellness services, extreme exhaustion. That sounds even worse. He looked at his beautiful, infuriating, and shockingly caring wife, who was spouting the most ridiculous corporate nonsense with a straight face. He clutched his aching neck and his broken back, feeling a bizarre mix of anger, pain, and amusement. He wanted to argue, to yell, to protest her insane, high-handed methods. But what was this strange, warm, and fuzzy feeling bubbling up inside him? Just then, a weak voice piped up from the bed. "So what about your little puppy?" The question hung in the air, instantly chilling the room. The hint of amusement vanished from Willow's face, replaced by a look as sharp and cold as a shard of ice. She narrowed her eyes at the man in the bed who, despite his injuries, was still picking a fight. "Puppy." Willow's voice was dangerously soft. "Leo, your injuries must not be that severe if you have the energy to worry about stray dogs." A shiver went down Leo's spine. He shrank back a little, but couldn't stop himself. "So you're just going to string him along? Now that? Well." He trailed off as a sharp twinge in his back silenced him. Willow paced to the side of the bed, her heels sinking silently into the plush carpet. "The smoke screen has served its purpose," she said flatly. "The moment I left that mark on your neck, his contract was terminated. He'll receive his severance and a bonus for his troubles. He can thank me from a beach in the Maldives." Leo blinked. A bonus? This woman was ruthless. "And Assistant Matthews," he pressed, unable to let it go. Willow raised an eyebrow. She coolly took out her phone. "The corporation is expanding its operations into Central Africa. We need a talented, resilient executive to spearhead a 3-year market analysis and infrastructure development project. Mr. Matthews, with his can-do attitude, is the perfect candidate. The transfer is effective immediately." She showed him a screen. The formal, corporate language of the transfer order was a masterclass in professional exile. Central Africa, 3 years, infrastructure development. Leo suddenly felt a pang of sympathy for the poor guy. "You're ruthless," he finally managed to say. Willow put her phone away. When she looked back at him, her eyes held an unmistakable glint of possessiveness. She leaned down, her fingertips tracing the edge of the mark on his neck again. "From now on, I don't need a smokescreen," she said, her voice a low, possessive murmur. "You, Leo Kingston, are my weakness. And if anyone dares to touch my weakness, I'll show them exactly what our mergers and acquisitions department is capable of. The words were a threat, but to Leo, they sounded suspiciously like a declaration. I am your vulnerability, and you'll destroy anyone who tries to exploit it. This is the most overbearing, arrogant, yet somehow thrilling way of showing affection that he can imagine. He looked into her beautiful face, which now screamed, I own you, and the warm, fuzzy feeling from before began to grow uncontrollably, overwhelming the pain and his bruised ego. Damn it, why did he kind of like this? Willow saw the complex swirl of emotions in his eyes. Protest, indignation, and finally, a reluctant acceptance, and a flicker of satisfaction crossed her face. Your job for now, she announced, her tone shifting back to that of a CEO assigning a quarterly objective, is to lie there. Eat your meals. Let the nurse change your dressings. And heal your neck, Anne. Her gaze dropped meaningfully to the lump in the duvet covering his lower half. You're back. With that, she turned, picked up her tablet, and settled onto a sofa in the adjoining sitting area. The screen lit up with complex charts and figures. She was already back at work. Leo was left alone in the massive bed, staring at the ceiling. His domineering, Ice Queen wife was working just a few feet away, having just ruthlessly eliminated all her rumored lovers. And the two of them had apparently just entered a very strange, very new phase of their relationship. What is my life? Leo muttered, but he couldn't stop the small smile from creeping onto his face. The Dragon of South Beach was officially grounded, but as he carefully rolled over, burying his face in the pillow that still smelled faintly of her, he took a deep breath. Maybe this wasn't so bad after all.